So long before Robert Smith had, penned a single lyric or recorded those iconic breathy vocals for Just Like Heaven, the song's instrumental demo was actually already a massive hit across continental Europe.
Right, which is just wild to think about.
It really is. It was handed over to a French television show called Les Enfants du Rock to be used as their theme tune.
Oh.
Yeah. So you end up with this bizarre historical irony where this central melody of what would become a defining alternative pop anthem was famous to millions of French television viewers before it was even officially a Cure song. Welcome to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking.
I mean, imagine that. You're hearing the theme song to your favorite weekly rock show, right? Getting that specific instrumental melody just completely lodged in your brain week after week.
Exactly.
And then months later, you turn on MTV, and there's Robert Smith, smeared lipstick, wild hair, singing this deeply emotional lyric over that exact same French television theme.
It must have been a completely surreal sequence of events for those viewers.
Oh, absolutely surreal.
Well, welcome to our deep dive, everyone. We have a massive stack of sources in front of us today, ranging from comprehensive scholarly essays and musicological breakdowns to various cultural critiques.
A really great batch of material today.
Yeah, and they are all focused on dissecting the Cure's 1987 alternative pop masterpiece, Just Like Heaven.
Which is such a fascinating track.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack how a band that was, let's be honest, famous for gloom and doom, managed to engineer a deceptively bright pop song that secretly masks deep Gothic anxiety.
Yes, that contrast is everything.
We are going to explore the meticulous layer-by-layer studio architecture that makes this track instantly recognizable the second it comes on the radio. Okay, let's unpack this. To figure out why a television producer in France would instantly recognize the power of this track, we have to travel to Studio Miraval in southern France.
Right, down in southern France. This was during the winter of 1986. And that studio session is where the band built what we can essentially call the Additive Intro Blueprint.
The Additive Intro Blueprint. I like that.
Yeah, because it's basically a masterclass in acoustic density and psychological momentum. Like, the first 51 seconds of Just Like Heaven are incredibly calculated.
Right, they don't just throw a wall of sound at it.
Exactly. The instruments do not just all start at once. They enter sequentially, perfectly spaced out every 8 bars, and locked into this really brisk tempo of 150 beats per minute.
You know, it reminds me of the opening montage of a heist movie.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like the crew is being assembled one by one, right?
Yeah.
And every single person brings a specific, absolutely necessary skill to the job. You cannot pull off the heist without all of them layering their talents together.
That is exactly what's happening musically. Every element here has a distinct frequency to occupy and really a distinct psychological job to perform on you, the listener.
So who's the first guy through the door in this heist?
It starts with the muscle. Drummer Boris Williams kicks the door down with an explosive opening snare fill, and then he just locks into a very driving motoric drum beat.
And for anyone wondering what a motoric beat is, it basically means it sounds almost machine-like in its precision.
Right. Very robotic, but human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is relentless, giving the song this urgent forward push, even though it is being played by a human being.
It establishes a racing heartbeat right out of the gate.
Yeah, and with that rhythm section acting as the driving force, the space suddenly has to widen to fit the rest of the crew, right? Okay. So after those first 8 bars, we get the safecracker, that's Simon Gallup's bass line. And he is not just thumping away on low booming root notes, he is actually playing a syncopated, octave-jumping bass line.
I always notice how much that bass line bounces. And by syncopated, you mean he's playing slightly off the main beat.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he is playing in the spaces between the drum hits, jumping from low notes to high notes, which creates a groove that physically pulls your body forward. It acts like a secondary melody all on its own. It creates an incredible elasticity. Then, right at the 16-bar mark, the crowd control arrives. The stereo field suddenly bursts open with dual-tracked Ovation acoustic guitars.
Played by Robert Smith and Paul Thompson.
Yeah, and they are panned hard left and hard right.
Panning them like that creates such a massive sense of space for the listener. It is like putting on a pair of headphones and feeling the walls of the room suddenly push outward in both directions.
It really does open up the whole room.
But the center of the track is left completely wide open.
And leaving that center open is crucial, because at bar 21, the mastermind steps into that empty space. Robert Smith plays his iconic descending lead guitar hook.
Oh, that tone is just incredible.
It really is. It cuts right through the acoustic guitars because it is heavily processed with chorus and flanger pedals.
Right, and the flanger pedal is what gives the lead guitar that swooshing, almost underwater jet plane sound.
Yeah, that sweeping effect.
The pedal essentially takes the guitar signal, duplicates it, and plays the second signal slightly out of phase with the first. It creates a dizzying, wave-like wash over the listener's ear.
Which is brilliant.
And it is the exact melody that the French TV show fell in love with. You know, it is so catchy, it acts as a vocal melody before anyone even sings.
Right. And to cap off this entire heist, the getaway vehicle arrives. Tolhurst introduces a high register string synthesizer.
Ah, the synths.
Yeah, he uses a combination of a Selena string ensemble and a Prophet 5 synthesizer.
Oh, wow. So vintage gear. Those synthesizers are legendary for a reason. They produce this thick, artificial string sound. By putting them in the high register, Tolhurst is essentially painting the ceiling of the song.
Exactly. He fills in all the remaining high-end frequencies. The drums own the bottom, the acoustic guitars own the sides, the lead guitar owns the center, and the synthesizers cap the frequency spectrum up top.
It's just brilliant structural engineering.
It really is. When you, as a listener, feel your own heart rate start to match a piece of music, it is not an accident. The sequential layering at 150 beats per minute is scientifically designed to manipulate your anticipation.
Because they withhold the full sonic picture, right?
Yes. They piece it together slowly, so your ear naturally craves the final piece of the puzzle. By the time Robert Smith actually opens his mouth at the 51-second mark, the acoustic stage is so perfectly constructed, you are entirely trapped in their euphoric bubble.
And that transition from the instrumental intro into the vocal entry, it fundamentally shifts the focus of the song.
How so?
Well, we move from this incredibly precise mathematical sonic construction into a feeling of intense physical sensation.
Yeah.
The music now has to perfectly mirror the dizziness of the lyrics.
Right. The lyrics are so visceral.
They really are. And the inspiration for those lyrics is remarkably literal. Smith wrote this about a trip he took with his childhood sweetheart and future wife, Mary Poole.
Oh, Mary Poole actually stars in the music video for the song, right? The one directed by Tim Pope.
Yes, exactly. You see her dancing right there on a cliff edge with Smith wearing a wedding dress.
Which is a striking visual.
And they didn't just go to like a nice park for a picnic. They went to Beachy Head, which is this sheer 500-foot chalk cliff formation on the southern coast of England.
Oh, wow. 500 feet?
Yeah, it is a straight vertical drop into the churning English Channel, and it's often completely enveloped in coastal fog. So you have this romantic encounter happening quite literally on the edge of a massive, dangerous precipice.
That makes so much sense. The lyrics heavily emphasize that physical disorientation. He's singing about spinning on a dizzy edge, kissing until he is hyperventilating, and dancing in the deepest oceans.
It is a total sensory overload.
It really is. And this is where the technical magic happening underneath those lyrics really shines. Because the music has to induce that exact physical disorientation in your own body.
So how do they achieve that musically?
Well, during the verses, the song drives forward very securely in the key of a major. It feels safe, bright, and propulsive. But when it hits the chorus, when he sings the line, "You, soft and only," there is a sudden harmonic shift to a non-diatonic G major chord.
Okay, wait. I know enough about music theory to recognize that a non-diatonic chord breaks the established rules. Like, it technically does not belong in the key signature the band is playing in, right?
What's fascinating here is you're exactly right. A diatonic chord naturally belongs to the home key. Your ear anticipates it because it follows the mathematical rules of the scale you have been hearing.
Okay.
A non-diatonic chord comes from outside that home key. So by shifting from A major to that unexpected G major chord, the band removes the musical anchor that your brain was relying on.
Man, it is exactly like walking down a flight of stairs in the dark.
Yes.
You confidently step down expecting another solid stair to be there, but you have actually reached the bottom. For a split second, there's nothing under your foot and your stomach just drops.
That is the literal sensation of harmonic weightlessness. You feel the floor drop out from under you. It structurally mirrors the vertigo, the swooning, and the fainting that Smith is describing in the lyrics. You are spinning on that dizzy edge harmonically as well as lyrically.
See, I have to push back on the song's mainstream reputation here, though.
Okay, what do you mean?
Just, like, Heaven is universally considered one of the greatest pop love songs of the 1980s. It gets played at weddings constantly. People dance to it feeling nothing but joy.
Sure, all the time.
But if you actually listen to the architecture you just described, the lyrical anxiety, the hyperventilating on a 500-foot cliff, the harmonic vertigo where the floor drops out from under you, is this actually a joyful love song? Or is it a panic attack, cleverly disguised as bright pop music?
You know, you are hitting on the defining paradox of The Cure right there. It is absolutely both. Yeah. To understand how they coexist, you have to look at this through the lens of the romantic literary tradition, like the tradition of 19th century poets like Percy Bysshe Shelley or Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
Okay.
They wrote extensively about the concept of the sublime. In the sublime, true ecstasy and genuine terror exist simultaneously.
Oh, I see. Because standing on the edge of a 500-foot cliff is incredibly beautiful, but it demands a level of terror because one wrong step means you fall. The beauty is amplified by the danger.
Exactly. Falling in love within the narrative of this song is framed as a complete loss of control. It is thrilling, but it is deeply destabilizing.
So the music reflects both sides of that.
Right. The brightness of the pop arrangement, the driving motoric beat, the jangly acoustic guitars that represents the thrill of the romance, but the harmonic weightlessness and the breathlessness of the vocals represent the terror of losing yourself entirely in someone else.
That specific tension, that incredibly tight tightrope walk between bright pop immediacy and deep Gothic vulnerability is exactly what launched The Cure into the stratosphere.
Without a doubt.
It was not just a clever musical trick, you know. It was the exact emotional frequency that allowed them to break into the mainstream.
It profoundly altered their career trajectory. I mean, consider where they came from just a few years prior.
Very dark stuff.
Yeah, in the early 1980s, they were releasing albums like Pornography, which were defined by claustrophobic despair, oppressive drum machines, and heavy nihilistic doom.
A tough listen for the average pop fan.
For sure. They were underground post-punk darlings, beloved by goth culture, but they were almost collapsing under their own psychological weight.
But then, on October 5th, 1987, they released Just Like Heaven as the third single from their sprawling double album, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, and it becomes their ultimate commercial breakthrough.
Huge breakthrough.
It reached number 29 in the UK. And crucially, it was their very first top 40 hit in America, peaking at number 40 on the Billboard Hot 100 in December 1987.
Breaking America in 1987 was a monumental shift. The college radio scene was primed for music with emotional depth and shadow, but the mainstream MTV audience still required a digestible hook.
So this song was the bridge.
Exactly. Just like Heaven functioned as a Trojan horse, they smuggled their underground post-punk anxiety into a radio-friendly pop structure. They went from playing sweaty clubs to becoming international arena headliners without compromising their shadowy identity.
And you can see how indestructible that underlying structure is by looking at how other artists have reinterpreted the song over the decades.
Oh, the covers are fascinating.
Right. Other bands immediately latched onto its dual nature, pulling at different threads of that ecstasy terror dynamic. Take Dinosaur Jr., for example. They released a legendary cover in 1989, just 2 years after the original.
Yeah, Jay Mashus and Dinosaur Jr. took this pristine, meticulously engineered pop track and completely dismantled the shiny exterior. They turned it into a screeching noise rock anthem.
They sped up the tempo throughout the acoustic guitars entirely and replaced them with a massive, abrasive wall of fuzz distortion.
It's so loud.
It is. But the distortion works so well because it isolates the panic attack hidden in the lyrics. The screeching guitars mimic the internal anxiety of losing control. And honestly, the best part of their cover is the ending.
Oh yeah, the abrupt stop.
The song just cuts off abruptly right in the middle of a verse because their recording tape literally ran out in the studio. And they just decided to leave it that way.
And Robert Smith absolutely loved that mistake. He publicly stated it was his favorite cover of any Cure song, specifically because that abrasive energy captured the raw, passionate anxiety that was always hiding just beneath the polished surface of the original track.
But then you flip the coin completely to the year 2005. The singer Katie Melua recorded a cover for the romantic comedy film also titled Just Like Heaven.
A totally different vibe.
She went in the exact opposite direction of Dinosaur Jr.
She really did. She stripped away all the post-punk drive, slowing the tempo down to a crawl, and turned the track into a gentle acoustic jazz ballad.
Beautiful, though.
Very beautiful. By removing the motoric drums and the driving bass line, Melua exposed the wistful, aching melancholy of the core melody. She isolated the vulnerability.
It makes you marvel at the sheer structural perfection required for a single piece of music to survive that kind of polarized treatment.
It really does.
You have a single melody that can be convincingly delivered as both a screeching, distorted alternative rock panic attack and a gentle cinematic lullaby. It proves how bulletproof Smith's songwriting was during those initial writing sessions.
It demonstrates that the song is fundamentally about a feeling so universal, that overwhelming, disorienting rush of human connection, that it can be successfully translated into almost any musical language.
We have spent this deep dive exploring how the song was built mathematically, how it climbs and builds momentum using the Additive Intro Blueprint, and how its harmonic weightlessness perfectly captures the terror of falling in love. But, the most profound artistic choice Robert Smith made was actually how he decided to end the song.
Yes. The ending is a stroke of brilliance because it refuses to give the listener the easy, expected way out.
Unlike most pop songs of the era.
Exactly. In the 1980s, the standard practice for a massive pop hit was the fade-out. A fade-out is incredibly comforting to the human ear. It implies that the party is still going on, the emotion is still happening, and we, the listeners, are just slowly backing away from it. It leaves you feeling secure.
But Just Like Heaven violently rejects the fade-out.
It really does.
It features an incredibly abrupt cut. At 3 minutes and 32 seconds, the driving rhythm section, which has been pushing us forward relentlessly since Boris Williams' very first snare fill, just stops dead.
The layers of guitars vanish, the synthesizers evaporate. Robert Smith is left entirely isolated on a single word, alone.
It's chilling.
There is this sudden, haunting, trailing reverb on that one word that just hangs in the empty air for a fraction of a second before plunging into total silence.
It completely shifts the context of everything you just spent the last 3 minutes listening to.
Yeah.
In that final verse, the narrative takes a sharp, devastating turn. He sings, "Daylight licked me into shape. I must have been asleep for days."
Right, the realization.
The narrator is waking up. The euphoric dream state is breaking.
He opens his eyes and finds himself completely alone on that chalk cliffside above a raging sea, realizing that the beloved is gone.
Wow.
The abrupt musical cut perfectly reinforces that narrative turn. It acts as the jarring, disorienting sensation of snapping awake from a deep sleep. The magic trick is over, the heist is finished, and the illusion has evaporated.
It leaves you with a chilling realization about the fleeting, transient nature of a dream state. It forces you to confront the reality that the euphoria cannot last forever, which leaves you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over today as we wrap up our deep dive.
What's that?
Well, Just Like Heaven is a track that perfectly engineered the feeling of being completely, dizzyingly overwhelmed by love. But by refusing to give us a comforting, gentle fade-out, it forces us to ask a harder question. Does a perfect pop song, much like a perfect memory, only derive its ultimate power from the fact that it eventually has to vanish?
The ecstasy might only be beautiful because the shadow is always waiting right there at the edge of the cliff.
If you like this episode, please support the show by liking and subscribing.